It's night, it's raining, there's this lonely trailer, and there's this woman hovering over a small child.
And it's really scary, like the psychopathy of it.
You got your hooks in me, and I wanted to believe that that moment was real. Welcome back, folks, to the SideQuest Book Club. We have a really fun guest on the show today. We just finished reading Paper Roses, and we get to meet with Debbie Show herself to come and chat with us about the writing process, how it was. For me, my biggest questions are going to be like, what was real, what was not real, because it all felt real. So let's get into it. She actually just got a really great Kirkus review as well. So why don't we start there, Debbie, if you want to just share with us this wonderful review you just got from Kirkus.
Yeah, so Kirkus review is called an engrossing, detailed family drama with an affecting emotional center, and they gave me a get it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent. I can resonate with that because I believe everything that they just said as someone who read it. And I told this to Slava too. I was like, hey, I really like this. And maybe it was just, I think in the last episode, I called it a palate cleanser because we read so much horror and thriller, just knowing that like some of this relates to a person that I've met, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I had a different experience reading it. It felt like I was going through it with you, even though I know that you've changed things and like use this to process what happened. I was constantly wondering, was that real? Was that part real? And so, like, I would love to dive into that at some point during the episode.
Yeah. Thank you.
One thing that I really enjoyed about the book is each POV, even though it's first person and the prose wasn't that detailed. There wasn't a lot of things, unpacked for us. And that's not a critique. It's just a style of writing, and it's totally fine. But I was pulled in, gripped by each POV, whether it was Abby's or Yasmina's. They're in their thoughts a lot. They were describing little events here and there. And again, it wasn't a Tolstoy level description of a room, but I felt as if I was there with Yasmina on the train with the little girl, the 10-year-old girl. Like I was there while she was being thrown in a car by her brother-in-law. And with Abby, and we talked about this in the interview, like I've had a similar dysfunctional experience with my mom. And so I not only could empathize with the character, but I was able to be like placed almost in the room with her, like a fly on the wall, if you will. So out of the bat, I think you did a fabulous job. And I just mentioned this to you before we hit the record. I'll mention this to the audience. First-time author, and I know you're a writer, so you've written before. But for a first-time author, I think you knocked it out of the park. So kudos. Kirkus review, well-deserved.
Thank you.
I agree with Slava. I know you've written before, but I love this part of the show where we get to have people who've written their books come and talk about it, because Slava and I think we talked about this in the last chat that we had, are aspiring to be authors. And you spoke about, just as we were about to hit record, so I'd love for you to dive into this for us. You had a specific type of editor who met with you for a couple years to help unpack this story and also give it that that maturity that a lot of us first-time writers don't have.
Yeah.
Would you walk us through what that journey was kind of like, and like what was it like working with that type of person? Remind us what that type of editor was as well, and just kind of like all the things attached to it.
Yeah, so I hired a developmental editor, but she was actually also a writing coach. And because I wanted to do this right, because I knew that, if I had written this right when it was happening, right, with my sister's arrest, I would have put out something opportunistic, right of the moment. I might have sold some more books. It wouldn't have been very good. But I'm not that kind of person. I'm actually, really how I felt about it is I've always been an artistic type. And, we have jobs that pull us away from that. But I figure at this time of my life, at this age, I have the resources to create a piece of art. So however it went, whether it sold 2 copies or whether it sold 0 copies, it was going to be some piece of art that I put out in the world. So it meant a lot to me. So I just hired somebody and I paid the heck out of her because it was by the hour. And sometimes every 2 weeks we
Oh, wow.
met, but it was once a month for sure. And she would read a chapter, and then like sometimes I would have to just scrap the whole chapter, and start all over again.
Really?
But she did say that she wouldn't have taken me on if she didn't think I could write it, because she had seen my work. And I said, well, can anybody pay you? And she said, well, if you weren't good, I just would have told you to write a short story. So I did write it.
At least
I
she's
did
honest.
write it, but she told me, like, the train scene, for example. I think when you're writing autobiographical fiction, you tend to dump a lot of stuff in there. And so I shortened that way up. I mean, that had like parents and all kinds of crazy stuff. And writing autobiographical fiction is challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mentioned this in our interview with you, is my short story, novella, whatever you want to call it, is autobiographical. And as I've been inspired by you and the other authors that we've had on, or I guess encouraged, threw me back into writing, because as I've said, 7 freaking years of writing this stupid short story. I noticed that I was kind of doing the opposite. It's autobiographical, but I was making the character more muted and more helpless than I was in real life. And I'm like, well, why am I doing that? Why can't I just go down a completely different path? Like, take some creative freedom and make him different than me, but not a complete watchcloth like I was making him in the previous version. So I spent a lot of time just rewriting him, which is me, in a way that's more realistic, but still not just here's what happened to Slava in 1992.
Yeah.
So I can resonate with how difficult it can be to write about yourself without dumping so much information, or without, for me, it was, I didn't want it to be a diary of Slava's life. I wanted to change the character up a little bit.
Yeah.
But I did it so much where I'm like, well, this is not even me anymore.
Yeah, I can relate to that passive part. I mean, I read somewhere that people that have been through a lot of trauma, sometimes their voice when they write, their characters are sometimes just like way too meek, like just roll over and let things happen. And that's something that like professors have to help authors through. And that was a challenge I had. So many times I had to go back and say what would Nancy Drew do? Like, my character, Abby, had to be the type of person who didn't put up with anything, who jumped out the window, who jumps out a window and gets away.
Yeah.
And doesn't just like put up with it, because that's not what readers want to read. And it's not the way, you want to retell your story. And I love what you said, by the way. Last interview, you talked about moving the chess pieces around. And it feels really good to do that, by the way.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And it did so much for me, like mentally, and even as this aspiring writer, I'm like, wait a minute, if I just let go of these artificial guardrails that I gave myself, I wrote an amazing opening line. And instead of it starting with the inciting incident, like I had it, because I wanted it to be impactful. So I started right when my mom is like in the middle of the night grabbing me out of bed, waking me up. I set up the weather. I talked about how the weather outside the trailer. And because I let go of those guardrails, I was like, oh, wow. So it's night, it's raining, there's this lonely trailer, and there's this woman hovering over a small child. That is such a better opening than a kid woke up to, and I didn't write it this way, like a kid waking up to, his mom dragging him out of bed. So, yeah. It's very freeing. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I've actually gotten over, I mean, this is not the purpose of writing, but I'm completely over what happened right now, from writing it. So it was very therapeutic. I don't even hardly think about it anymore.
I was going to ask that as a question, is what was was there a turning point where you felt the burden was no longer there, or was the process of writing just so seamless with the letting go that you forgot that you used to carry the burden. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it was not seamless. I mean, there were months that I would write chapters where my character was just way too angry with everybody and nobody was going to like her at all.
Yeah.
You know, and I had to completely scrap that. I like, what did I just write? Because that's not even my personality. But I think it took a couple years, honestly, to let it go and to write with empathy, because it's really, really hard to write with empathy. When people, it's easy to write with empathy when you don't know the people you're writing about. But when the people you're writing about really didn't like you from the get-go,
yeah,
it's really hard to write about them and tell their story. You know, the multi-generational trauma, and about why they might be, you know, the way they are. That was hard.
Yeah, let's go down that path a moment if you don't mind. Like, what was it? How did you break through that? Was it just you write chapters and then you scrap them and then you try it again? Or was your editor able to help draw out a process for you?
She actually didn't help me that much. I mean, I basically outlined the chapters I was going to write. But then when I was finished with the whole thing, she read it, the whole thing, charged me a couple $1,000 for that. And then she said, basically what happened is when you're writing autofiction, you forget that the reader doesn't know certain things. You think that they know it. So she told me where I had holes, especially when writing about my sister, where it sounded, let me get a drink. Sometimes it sounded like a bitter sister who's jealous of her other sister, because I didn't tell the whole story. Like, I missed the part where she did this or she did that. So I had to go back in and write some extra chapters to fill it in. And then I had to have like a beta reader, kind of, even from there, I had a beta reader read it and tell me. The thing about fiction is you got to have a satisfying ending, because in real life, it's just a continuing cycle that just never ends. And you never put a manhole cover on the emotions because you never really get the justice you need. I don't really need that anymore. But in fiction, you have to kind of put a stopper on it and give the readers the satisfying ending that they want, not necessarily the ending that you got.
Right. That's something that I am struggling through with this story, my story, because it's horror genre, so it's not going to have a happy ending.
Yeah.
But how do I make the ending at least satisfying, you know, or bittersweet or melancholy in a way that, like, oh, wow, that was a good ending. Yeah. It wasn't necessarily that, you know, everything is now peaches and roses, but it's satisfying. Because you can have a sad ending, you can have a horrible ending, right? Horrible in the sense of bad things happen and there's no resolution. Yeah. But it has to be done in a way where it satisfies the reader. Where they walk away, I'm like, you know, and you take them there from page one, and when they're reading the final page, they're like, oh, I understand why there is no resolution for the character. But you have to wrap it up somehow. You know, that's, I don't want to say believable, but believable too, right?
Well, I am right. That's really funny you say that, because the novel I'm working on right now is a horror.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I decided to do a departure and have the main character not be me. So that'll be interesting. Yeah.
There you go. Learn more about that later.
Yeah.
Curious
but
about
honestly, I resonate with what you're saying, because like in real life, you know, people get away with things and then they just get away with things and then they just continue to get away with things. So that was the original ending, you know? And then I thought, well, it was the beta reader who told me it cannot end like that. Fiction readers are not going to be happy. You cannot have that ending. So that was very helpful.
Yeah.
So the ending is kind of camp. I'm not going to give it away, but it was a little campy.
It did put a bow on things, for sure.
Yeah.
Did you just have one beta reader or did you have multiple?
Well, you know, it's really funny. I couldn't get people to read it.
Oh,
I had to pay. Well, actually, my daughter-in-law was a really good beta reader. She was great. I didn't have to pay her. She's a reader. But I couldn't get anyone that I didn't know the story to read it. So I ended up having to get a paid beta reader to read it. And it was worth it to me because she did a really great job. Because, your friends sometimes are just going to say how wonderful it is.
Yeah.
They're not going to tell you the truth about.
It's not helpful.
No.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's
not
so
helpful.
great. And even like in the beginning, that's one piece of advice. Don't share your unfinished work, because when you're writing it, you think it's really great. And then you share it with people. Because the first draft is always really bad.
Oh, it's the worst.
Horrible. But in your mind, you think it's really good. I don't know what kind of like delusion people work under, but until you step away from it for a while, you think you just wrote, Tolstoy, and then you step away from it and you look at it again, you were like, oh no, that wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 9 drafts of this thing.
9? Okay. Nice.
It sounds like you can relate, Slava.
I can.
Oh, yeah.
Because, for chapter 1, it's finally done. And I think it's been a few months of me just writing the first chapter and rewriting, cutting things, making him, the main character, less like a washcloth, writing in a new intro. And only a week ago or so, about a week ago, well, a couple of days before last week's recording, I looked at it, I'm like, okay, this is good. Now, I know it's not good in the sense that it can be published tomorrow, but like wow, it took 9, 10, whatever rewrites I did over the last few months. I'm like, this is finally something that I'll be proud to give to a beta reader or even a professional editor.
Yeah.
And now down to chapter 2.
So your process was, I wrote the chapters and then I went back and we went through. So everybody has a different process.
Yeah. I have 10 chapters. I'll probably write 2 more for the ending, but I have 10 chapters right now, and some of the chapters are just 2 sentences because I know where I want to go.
Yeah.
And I had an inspiration in the shower this morning as I was listening to an audiobook, and I was like, ooh, that is a good line. And so I quickly wrote it down. I'm like, that line is going to be, I'm not going to steal the line, obviously, but that line from a different book is going to be a genesis for Ed talking to a girl from school in the library. There's a scene in the library where Ed goes. And so it's a process, and it's rewriting, and then you hear something, you see something that inspires a sentence, and then that sentence, for me at least, marinates for a couple of days, sometimes weeks, before that scene comes to anything close to what would be, an action scene or an inner monologue. So it's sometimes painful. So
very painful. It's sometimes it's torture, honestly. But you know what? You remind me, you saying that. Have you read Stephen King's book on writing?
Oh, okay. One of my favorite books.
Okay. So I guess I think the same way you do, because sometimes I'll get stuck and then I'll just go for a walk. It'll take me like 3 days to come up with a solution. Like I would kind of write my character into a corner, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, what's going to happen next? Like, I'll give you an example. That scene with Yasmina in the desert and the Jeep or the truck, right? That started because I realized that it was way too many miles to go from one city to the next. It would have taken them like a month to get there.
Yeah.
So I had to sit around. It took me like 2 or 3 days to figure out, okay, this is what I'm going to have to do.
Yeah, Stephen King's on writing was inspirational and foundational for me as a writer. Like, kill your little darlings, stop using adverbs, stop talking about she noticed, tell us what she noticed.
Yeah.
That phrase itself can be used numerous times in a book, but you have to look at it and say, am I just explaining to an author that somebody inside a world to a reader inside a world they're trying to get immersed? I'm just going da 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 da, and then this, and then this, and then she took a sip of water. Instead of saying she noticed the coffee was hot, say like she scalded her lips or something like that. So it takes me a while to, well, let me preface this. Sometimes I barf stuff out on page, whether it's inspired by an audiobook or it's inspired by a walk in the park, and then I have to go back and slowly, sharpen the smooth out the edges, I should say, not sharpen, maybe sharpen the prose, but make it more like something I would want to read. And Stephen King, like as a writer, when I listened to his lectures, read his book on writing,
Mm-hmm.
he often talks about how sometimes he doesn't know where he's going. Like, and sometimes the best thing to do is just to, like he says, kill the darling. He had in The Stand, he had these people that he kills off, and the only reason he killed them off was because I've taken them as far as I can go
Ah,
as
yeah.
characters, and he's like, so they're all gonna die, and that's why you know if you read The Stand, there's a portion where a bunch of characters die all at once, and you follow these characters for now 700 pages, and they're all just dead.
Yeah.
And the flip side of that, that's maybe like a quote unquote negative side of the coin. The flip side of that is you will be writing, and then you will know exactly where this character should be in 4 chapters, right? So when I was writing a scene between a pastor and Ed's mom and Ed's mom is triangulating.
Yeah.
She's trying to get Ed in trouble, and the pastor is just ambivalent about everything. And it's easier for him just to shit on Ed than to deal with this, this mother son
Yeah.
dynamic. And as I'm writing that scene, completely separated from the ending, I figured out the ending. I'm not going to spoil it here, not because I don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
trust you. If this was a conversation around a cup of coffee and not the audience involved, I would tell you the ending. But in that moment, I'm like, I have the ending, and so now I have to fill in the gaps because I have chapter 1 complete. I have the ending, but I have like 4 or 5 major scenes that I have to fill out, and that's that is positive. I'm not complaining about that, but sometimes you just figure out, oh, Ed's gonna be in this situation, but then in the book, and you see it like in your mind's eye as clear as you'd be watching a movie, and now it's your job to get Ed to that point.
Yeah. I agree with you. I'm a lot like you as a writer. I guess you call it a pantser. I think Stephen King is kind of that way too. He has this idea and he just starts writing. And other people just outline every single chapter, everything that's going to happen. I'm a lot like you. Like I have to take a walk. And then during my walk, or I'll be walking somewhere at work and it'll come to me and it's like, oh, I got it. It's torture, honestly. You're right about it being torture. I don't know why I'm putting myself through it again, but it is torture. But it does. I did write the chapters out of order. Like I wrote the redemption arc. Almost I wrote that redemption arc for Abby first.
Mm,
Where she gets into trouble. At that part, I wrote kind of toward the beginning, and then I kind of like filled in. Because you don't have to start with chapter 1. You can just write whatever chapter, and then you can shuffle them around a little bit too, as I learned.
I was gonna ask, what order? It sounds like you mentioned you're a pantser, so like you didn't outline beforehand. You just started writing. Is that
I
fair?
had a little bit of an outline, kind of like
Okay.
like a little bit like this all these things happen. Well, the outline was the truth, right? The true story.
Right. Yeah,
That's kind
that's
of like
fair.
the outline. I didn't have to do too much because I knew what was going to happen, right? I knew that Abby was going to go to Thanksgiving, right? I knew that there was going to be a driver's license scene. Like some of those scenes, I knew there was going to be a death scene, not to give it away, or
Hmm.
two. Um, so that made it a lot easier with autofiction than when just writing from scratch a story
Yeah.
that you're making up. So I had that part, but I didn't have like every single chapter filled in. It's like Slava said, I had like a line or two. That's
Hmm.
all I had, and then once I started writing, then I think the creative process really helped. Like I just kind of like from there, I just kind of like pantsed it a little bit. And that is
Yeah.
like reading Stephen King's book. That is his method as well.
Yeah. When you are writing these, did you write just Abigail's full, like just focused on her, and you wrote her chapters, and then you moved to like, hey, I need to fill in a little bit, so I make a couple for Hugh, or did you like, oh, I need Abby to do this, oh, let me switch over to someone else, Yasmina over here?
No, I did not do it in a linear fashion at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, wondering about the character arcs.
Yeah.
When I was working on my book that has been on a shelf for nearly a decade at this point,
Mm-hmm.
I was writing a high fantasy piece and started off with pantsing myself.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, it's just going to be this masquerade, and then this girl's going to get captured, and like I'll just write the rest of it. Wrote that, and then started like I swapped from pantsing over to outlining so that I could like figure out, okay, I need to know where I'm going. What kind of emotional journey are my characters going to go on, and then am I doing them the service as God of the world, right? To make sure that they are going through whatever scenes they need to go through to get to whatever that end state is. When you were writing yours, was it difficult to give that redemption arc or give that emotional journey for each of the characters because you're so you lived it because you lived it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I had an extremely hard time making the character of Abby do something awful. Like because that part was fiction, because she was a little too squeaky clean victimy, so I did give her a little crime to commit. Not a real crime.
We were going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Because then I read that, I'm like, I don't think Debbie did this.
But I'm telling you, people believe it. I don't know why they would believe I would do this, but that's like my number one question. Did Abby really do that? But the reason is that Abby was just coming across as a little too goody two shoes. I had to dirty the character up. My developmental editor said I had to dirty her up. And I wanted to have like this kind of like this idea that no one comes out unscathed, right? That we've got the character of Nikki, who's based on my sister. She's damaged, but Abby's got to be damaged too. When she comes from this family, some of it has to rub off on her. But writing that, I just had every excuse in the book for Abby doing it. She couldn't take accountability at all. I mean, that must have taken me 6 months to just have her do something. And I finally stumbled upon, took me ages, where her back was up against the wall, and that's why she did it. It was like she was, all these different, it was very hard. That was extremely difficult. Very good question.
Yeah, I've found that when writing characters, you want them to be the superhero, but then the problem is if they don't ever do anything bad, they're just Jesus in another form. Like in your book, they've never done anything wrong, and you're like, well, people don't want to read that. They want to feel relatable to the character. Like, oh yeah, sometimes when your back's against the wall, you do the thing, right? For those who haven't read it yet, and it's like, oh, okay, and it's weird, but it humanizes it for us because we've all at some point in our lives done something wrong. And so then it's like, all right, well, I can relate with this character a little more. But as the author, I also struggle with but I don't want them to do whatever.
Oh, I know.
It's like, I want them to be how I've made them. I don't want to scuff them up a little bit. It's like your development editor is so correct, but it's tough because there are darlings, right?
Yeah, it's like I'm this great person. Everybody thinks they're a great person. I'm a great person. Like I would never do that. But actually, I have done things in real life that I regret. Usually, stuff you do in your teens and 20s. But I didn't want to put those in. They were kind of pathetic. So I just made this arc up, this character that everybody believes, by the way.
It seemed believable. It was well written.
Yeah.
I asked Slava, I was like, do you think this is real?
Did you look up my license to make sure?
I did. I actually did.
It's like, oh my God.
I did. I so did it because I'm a research, like my academic tenure, if you want to call it that, experience has been mainly in research. So so that part of me couldn't help myself. I was like, Debbie show, something.
It's so funny.
But nothing came back.
I haven't had a single person not believe it. So I guess kudos to me because I was one of these days a psychologist is going to read it and go, no freaking way did that happen. That's because I think in our country you let people get away with it so much.
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
he never would have gotten in trouble, you know.
Well, it also feels like what you did to Abigail when you gave her this thing that she screwed up. Like she made some decisions, right, to provide for the family, and she it felt like a turning point. It really did, where she almost felt more real after that. You know, I know that you didn't really live these things out, but doing that, and maybe it was the level of detail, maybe it was the fact that she had to then start meeting with the other therapist to like work on her license, where it's like, oh, she's in the shit now because she did something wrong, right?
Yeah.
But I think it really played into this overarching theme that you talked about of like wanting to process like this generational trauma. You know, like no one gets out scot-free. So I think that even though you didn't live it, and it was a shock, and Slava and I talked about it for a while, we're like, do you think that she really? And then he looked it up, and we're like, all right, no, okay. It's fine. Because I was like, I can't wait to get Debbie back on the show. I'm going to ask her all about this. So, and this seems like a good transition, though, of like, tell me a little bit more about the things that did not happen that are in the book, because I just like kind of wanted to believe that it all happened. I was like, oh, all of it happened. I know that's not the case, right? But maybe it was just I was excited to read it and like live your experience, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been copying Slava's term about moving the chess pieces around ever since he said it, because, you know, like a lot of it did happen, but like for example, the opening scene, it didn't happen exactly like that. You know, like
Sure.
nothing really happened exactly like I wrote it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the whole license thing, I went down by myself, you know, it was kind of like I gave myself a couple friends. So there's a lot of like true things that happened that I just kind of rewrote it the way I wanted to. Made it a little more, I mean, in some ways I made it less dramatic. In some ways I made it more dramatic, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because the true story is just like so awful that everybody would absolutely hate my parents. They would find them the most despicable, unlikable people on the face of the earth. They would find Abby to be the biggest victim on ever born, you know. So that's kind of what, like, memoirs are only good if you're a celebrity. So I made actually the parent characters a lot better than they were, and less dramatic. But okay, what were we talking about to make it clear? Yeah, so the parts that are not true. Okay. Yasmina. She was a maid of ours in Morocco. She never came to the U.S.
Okay.
So there you go. That's a lot of the book, right?
Yeah.
One question that I do have, similar to the license thing, Dr. Laura.
Oh, yeah.
Did that really happen?
No.
Okay.
No.
Either way, I knew who you were talking about because my brother used to listen to her religiously, and he kind of got his parenting skills from her. And when I was reading that, I'm like, this sounds so absolutely real.
It does.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. I enjoyed the hell out of it because it was so, at the same time, it's so fantastical and almost, you know, unbelievable. At the same time, I know Dr. Laura. I've listened to the show. I've have her book on my shelf somewhere around here.
Yeah.
Because my brother gave it to me as, you know, mentoring effort or something. And so I was like, this would be such a shock to the system. You sitting there in the car and then listening to your mom talk to this person who is caustic in her advice. You know, it is so I enjoy the hell out of that. And even though it's fake, it doesn't break it for me because I thought that was a wonderful scene.
My mom loved Dr. Laura. So when she was lost, when she got older and a little wiser, because, you know, a lot of her big mistakes happened when she was in her early 20s because she had me at 18. So she got wiser as she got older. She wasn't perfect, but she would say, oh, I was listening to Dr. Laura, and Dr. Laura says that I should do blah, blah, blah. Or Dr. Laura says, and she was just like hanging on every word of Dr. Laura. So it was really easy. So because I also had a relative who was in love with Dr. Laura, because Dr. Laura just tells you what to do and you just do it. It's just really clear,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yep.
And she tells you you're an idiot and you just take it. Yeah, I'm an idiot. Okay, what's the next thing I need to do? It's like a prescription. So so that's why I wrote that, because my mother was such a huge fan. And I could actually see her calling Dr. Laura and getting a drubbing from Dr. Laura. Although Dr. Laura is much better now. Sometimes I
She's
watch
still
her.
around?
She's a lot better, and she's a little more empathic. I don't think she's as religious as she was before. But anyway, at that time, I think she was out of LA at that time
Yep.
when I was writing, and she's pretty tough on people.
That felt like a very cinematic moment. I asked Slava about that too. I was like, "You think this happened?" And then whatever you did, you got your hooks in me, and I wanted to believe that that moment was real, right? Because it just feels it doesn't matter if you listen to Dr. Laura or not. Like, talk radio, you call in, you have a conversation with someone. If you watched Frasier back in the day, same thing, right? Like, you'd call in, you'd tell them your problems, and they'd tell you what to do. And it was like, oh, that feels real, And so it wasn't, but the writing made me feel like it was real, which was excellent work.
Yeah, and as Jonathan was talking, the scene that came to my mind, which is, I guess, incidental in the long scheme of things and the bigger scope of the story, is Yasmina going to the fish market, right, and buying the salmon, and then meeting with that girl she met, and the girl actually helped her pay for the salmon. Like, even moments like that, and again, for the audience and for you, this is not just blowing smoke up your posterior. Moments like that also felt real, in the sense that I was there with Yasmina in the market. Like, I was inside her head, and I was hooked, to use Jonathan's analogy with getting your hooks in us. It was just the mundane moments and the cinematic moments were all just done well, Debbie. So
thank you.
Round of applause.
Thank you. I tried to make probably the not real parts are the cinematic parts. The things that didn't happen.
I mean, that checks out.
Yeah,
probably easier
that works. Yeah,
I tried to make it like a movie. Not that anybody's going to make a movie out of it.
But I
tried to make it like a movie, so people would keep reading.
Mission accomplished for us.
Yeah, we read a series on this podcast. It's called the Cradle series, and it's pretty much anime in book form.
Mm-hmm.
And Will White, the author of this series, the way he writes, it's action, 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 little break, action, 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 just like an anime movie or show would do it, and that keeps us engaged. It's 200 pages a book or something, and each book is a whirlwind. And so when it's appropriate for the story you're telling or the genre, you have to write it, like that, like a movie.
Yeah.
So people, are engrossed. Because something I've been learning as I've been doing some deep dives with authors, and by doing deep dives, I mean watching them talk about the craft, it's the way writing has evolved. Like, I can't write like Dostoevsky and expect anybody to read it. Dostoevsky served his purpose, and he's still read for a reason, but a new and upcoming author to take on whatever he wants to take on, to structure his prose like Dostoevsky, probably wouldn't work. Maybe even like Stephen King, like, he has evolved over time. Like, it does not read like You Like It Darker, which is a collection of short stories. So maybe Nightmares and Dreamscapes, another collection of short stories, does not read like You Like It Darker, which is a modern collection of short stories. So today's society, love it, hate it, you just have to write in a different way than you would 20 years ago to keep an audience engaged. That's fine. Like, you can sit there and bitch about it all day long, but we're in a different world, and so we have to write in a way that impacts our audience, that keeps our audience engaged, not the audience that we think they are, or even us. My short story, I can't write it for myself, because I know I'll read really weird crap and speculative stuff.
Yeah.
And not everybody reads it because it's just not their cup of tea. And we can argue about artistic integrity and what's cool and what's mainstream and all that other horse manure. But at the end of the day, it's a science and an art. There's the art part of it where you are creating a world, where you're pouring yourself out and you're creating this thing. And then the science part of it is more mechanical, and it involves the money part. You want people to read it, right?
Yeah.
You want people to at least buy one book. So you have to at least cater to one guy in the audience. But why not cater it to, 10,000 guys and 20,000 women? Then you have 30,000 people reading your book instead of one guy like me in my basement because I like speculative fiction.
Yeah. Yeah. And so asking me about what happened and what didn't happen, a lot of the book happened to Abby, right?
Yeah.
But every time somebody asks me, did this happen? I say no. It's crazy. So much of it happened. But then people just catch me on these things, like Dr. Laura, for example, because and that is where I just wanted to make the book interesting. Because the real story was like so pathetic. Like, she finds out her license is stolen. She has to go down by herself. The family doesn't support. Like, who wants to read that?
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, same way. Like my story, there was a lot of abuse. But if I wrote 90% of it, it'd be like, yeah, this is a shitty situation. This sucks. But it's not engrossing. It's not captivating. It's just a sad story. But the one event that is cinematic, it's on the level of Dr. Laura, meaning like, holy crap, the audience will be like, this really happened? I know this is autobiographical, but this happened? Because it's so beyond the scope of your usual abuse story.
Yeah.
And I can spoil this much. I was sleeping in bed, and my mom lost her watch. And at 2:00 in the morning, literally dragged me out of bed and forced me to find it. And after I found it, she was like, "Oh, okay. Well, good night." And I was like,
God.
"What the just happened? What just happened?" And she, she was screaming and yelling, pulling drawers open, and all the time it was in the bathroom. And so that opening scene, in more graphic detail and a little bit of creative license, is in the beginning of my short story. But the other stuff is, her not letting me go camping, her purposefully, her lying to my dad about me calling her an asshole so my dad would spank me, which is not in the book or not in the story. Yeah. But those are like, oh, okay, well, a mom who triangulates with an older brother, in this case, the pastor in my story, or a mom who lies about her son so she can, get some sort of power trip over him. Okay. Yeah. But to write those, I would have to add Dr. Laura level cinematic, edge to it for it to be at all interesting.
Yeah, and it kind of, my developmental editor really helped me there, because she does mostly, she's out of Israel, and she helps people write their memoirs mostly. And she said that when people write their memoirs, you can get really whiny and it's acceptable. And that's mean to say whiny, because really awful things happen to people and they're traumatized. But she even calls them trauma memoirs. That's her word for them. And, if I was, if I wanted to write Mommy Dearest, I better be a celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody really wants to hear about the coat hangers.
Right.
I didn't even couldn't even watch the movie, because I found it so, even though it was a celebrity memoir, I just didn't find it, entertaining.
Yeah. There's some stories by celebrities, and if you parse it down, like, yeah, these are horrible things that happened, or this is abuse, and maybe on some level it would be interesting if I was sitting hearing this story across the table over a beer. But a whole cinematic production of whether it's coat hangers or some celebrity's dad not believing in them until they ran away from home and had to live in the streets and then became an actor. Sure, that's could be compelling storytelling, but I feel the same way as sometimes. I'm like, okay, I also didn't have parents who didn't believe in me, and I don't know, maybe I'm being the asshole, but like, some of it's just not interesting.
You're not a famous actor, so we don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting, because I read I'm Glad My Mom Died, and I laughed my head. I thought that was fantastic. I laughed my head off. It was really funny. So it can be done.
Yeah, that's actually on my TBR list. I have it saved in my Audible to be read list.
Really, really good. I mean, again, I think she's really funny. So she makes, you know how you can have that gallows humor? The entire book was like gallows humor, because it's kind of a young person writing it, and I just thought it was really good. But otherwise, I'm not really that much into trauma memoir, and I don't think anybody would really want to read about somebody with a criminal sister, write about how awful her life was.
Speaking of writing, were there any times in the process that you had doubts of like, well, maybe I just shouldn't write this? And then like, if yes, how did you push through that?
Well, I had some about the real life story. Um, a lot of my sisters, after the New York Times article came out, which was kind of against my will, because they had found some transcripts when I had talked to the police after she had ripped me off. And they kind of held it over my head. They said, "Hey," I said, "I don't know if I really want to talk to you." And they said, "No, you're going to have to talk to us, because if you don't, we're just going to use what you told the police in 2007 or whatever." So I'm like, "Okay, I'll talk to you." And then I just started talking. So I felt really guilty about that, because that New York Times article used me as the continuous thread for every single one of the victims. Like, it always came back to what her sister said. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm in deep shit. So I felt like some shame a little bit about, coming from this kind of family, about it all being out there. Um, and I felt like that was a little bit hard, like the sins of the father, the sins of the sister.
That makes sense.
Journalism isn't what it used to be, I suppose. If they're going to stand there and hold it over your head just to get their article written.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't in a mean way, but it's like, oh, if you don't want to talk to us, we'll just, reference what you said. And I was pissed when I talked to the police way back
Yeah.
when. She had just ripped me off for a sum of money, not the same amount in the book, but for a sum of money. I'm a single
Yeah.
mom. I took it out of my kid's college fund to help her out. I found out it wasn't true what she said. I was so mad. I called the police to find out like what really did happen. And then they're telling me stuff and I'm mad, and my personality, I think back then especially, was just a little more like on the fly, just whatever, say whatever. And so there was a lot of awful things I told the police about my sister. I did not want it in a New York Times article.
That's fair.
Yep.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's probably not the source material you want to give
Oh God,
journalist.
no. I gave him new source material.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So what I was saying is, a number of her victims contacted me through that article, like Jemana Kidd, Lorianne Hart, and then I was connected with a few more. We were like on a Zoom call, which was crazy. There were like a number of her victims, and I did not put that in the book. A number of her victims and I were on a Zoom call, and what we were able to piece together is my sister is different people. Everybody she meets, she's a different person. So nobody, including her own family, really knows the real person. She's a soccer mom to Lorianne. She's she had friends who were criminals. She's a criminal with her criminal friends. Well, she rips everybody off. So she ripped the criminal off. That person was on the Zoom call. There was a person who was like once you get out of prison, they help rehabilitate you and they help you get on your feet. She was on the Zoom call. My sister ripped her off, and it was kind of like, oh my gosh. And they started telling the story about how they saw Tracy, and they were like 4 or 5 different people completely. So once that happened, the totality of I hate to use the word evil, but you realize there's no bottom to the behavior. There's like no bottom. And it's really scary, that like the psychopathy of it. And I did not write her like that in the book at all, by the way.
Correct. Yeah. Can
But
confirm.
yeah, I wrote her a lot more human than
Yes.
the real person. If somebody wants to write a book, I don't know if they would ever get the real person. But the real person, like, there is really, she meets every single one of the criteria for psychopathy. There's like a criteria called Hare's criteria for psychopathy, that it was really scary, and it helped me separate from her completely. Like, I don't have any more guilt at all about what I wrote or what I said. I actually gave her an extremely good edit.
I would agree,
Yeah.
based on hearing the story from you of like what actually happened versus what we read in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You did a really great job at giving what I would perceive as a more unbiased perception of each of the characters, right? Like your dad, I just have assumptions about what he did in real life versus like his moments in the book, right? And then your sister. So I think that was both good for the audience as a reader, right? Let me experience it, because we read, like, even memoirs, we read to get out of our own lives. I can turn on the news and I can see all the horrible stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't want to pick up a book and read that necessarily, or I'll pick up a history book about World War II or something, right? Like I'll pick up something really graphic. When I go into a book, I want to experience, at some sort of, I don't know another word, but like cinematography, right? Like some sort of like storytelling moments where you take me on the journey. But I think it adds that extra layer when it's when there's the author edit, if I can call it that, where I'm going through and you're like, well, this did happen. I've tweaked some things to be better for the story for my reader, which would be me.
Mm-hmm.
That I think is what we really want to read, which is why I think it's a good decision to not, just put in, hey, here's the memoir version of like all the terrible things that happened, right? Like
Yeah.
giving me the opportunity to step into the story and not feel like I'm now carrying the burden that you lived through as a child.
Yeah. And the fact that people, people come out of these things, they emerge
They do.
sometimes whole from these things. And I think that was the message I wanted to convey at the end. Like, maybe not 100% whole, maybe still damaged some.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, except Yasmina came out pretty whole. Yeah.
Perhaps instead of whole, we come out more mature, and part of that is whole for
Yeah,
ourselves.
wiser, more settled. I mean, I was telling somebody, it's kind of like when you hear about these people that were falsely convicted and they spent like 40 years in prison, and then they found out through the DNA that they never did it, and they're getting out of prison and they're like, oh, I have no hard feelings. I'm just ready to live the rest of my life. And you're like, wow, it's kind of like, okay,
You're a saint, I guess.
it's insane, but it is kind of how you feel sometimes after you come out of the other side of something. You don't want to go back and relive all the awful things that happened. You want to move forward.
No, that's a good word. Yeah.
Like, I can say that for myself. Like, I know what happened to me. I know it was evil and wrong. But like on this side of my life, on this line, whatever, this side of the line, I I don't walk around seething with anger against my mom or my brother or anybody. It's just, this is what happened. I have the scar tissue to show for it, but I am not inside my head constantly, woe is me, or even forget woe is me, just seething with anger.
Yeah.
Just, but it, similar to what you're saying, Debbie, or just said, it also allowed me to put distance between people that, are family technically, but not only do we have nothing in common, but I don't want to be the scapegoat. I don't want to be, I just don't want to play their games anymore. And some of them are not like horrible people. They're just stuck in their own little world. They have those horse blinders on, and all they see is this. And like, I also mature enough to be like, I don't have to hate you, but I don't have to have, tea with you either. I don't have to hang out with you at all.
Yeah.
So,
there's some people that have read the book that felt that for them it was therapeutic. because they have had that experience of being scapegoated in a family. And the things I have learned, I mean, while writing the book, because I'm telling you, there's a lot of really good therapists on TikTok that are talking about the narcissistic family system. So, not just the narcissistic person, but how the family system operates and how they have to have, you know, a golden child. They have to have a scapegoat. They have to really, sometimes the more dysfunctional the family, they have to send somebody out in the desert, like Yasmina got sent out into the desert. And they will eat their own young, right?
Yeah.
If it is to keep the family system intact, because that's more important than anything else. So, one of the purposes of writing this book was to, I thought, or even going on the TV shows I went on, is so people would see, right? Okay, now you can finally see the truth, right? I found out that people don't want to see the truth.
No.
No.
They don't want. You could have the truth right in front of them, and they don't want to see it. So at that point, it's like, okay, there's one in every generation that appears to be able to break free. In this case, I think my nephew, my sister Tracy's son, has broken free. But it's usually the person who's the outside, who's the outcast or on the outside, who can see the truth and they can break free. But everybody else is really in a horrible position. They're really stuck.
Mm-hmm. It's almost to me like Dorian Gray, right? Like if they admit that there's truth in front of them, they have to look at the picture and be like, I did all those things. And they have to admit it. That's how I, in my narrative, kind of put it together.
I absolutely love. You noticed I have a reference to that in my book. When I was a kid, I saw that movie, the picture of Dorian Gray.
Yep.
Absolutely love that. Just the whole idea of, you know, the picture in the basement getting older, you know, and you're just walking around doing whatever you want to do, but eventually it catches up to you,
Yeah.
you know, and in my case, it's multiple generations of it. I think that's
Right.
usually how it goes.
Yeah, especially when you're moving to a different country and then you have to assimilate and then like find normal here in the new country. Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of change.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to shift the topic. You mentioned you're writing a new book. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired it and how long you've been working on it?
Okay, so I had a very hard time figuring out what to write next because this was like my
Yeah.
big story. And I was going to write a continuation where about Japan because I'm really intrigued by the real life story about what happened in Japan. So much that I didn't write about. There's so much that happened to my sister that no one's going to ever know because she's not going to tell anybody. But I was a detective, just like Slava. I actually contacted ex-boyfriend. I contacted the girl that got my sister into quote unquote modeling in Japan. I know kind of what happened. So I wanted to originally write a story about Japan and, you know, get into the anime part and just kind of like the whole Japanese culture part and about what's going on over there because what was happening in the 80s and 90s was basically sex trade, honestly, having people go over as modeling and then giving them no way to support themselves as a model. And then they're kind of stuck, kind of trying to work their way back home. And it happened to Ashley Judd, who is who's an actress. So at first I was going to write about that. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. I don't want to write another sister story. I don't want to write another story about somebody in their family, somebody saves their sister or whatever. So I've started to write a horror about somebody who really doesn't even know the victim, right? Just kind of went to high school with her. And I'm using the scenery. I'm kind of creating a world based on the weather and the scenery rather than on the emotions going on inside. So I'm trying to see if that works. I'm meeting with my developmental editor next week. I've got like one and a half chapters written.
Very nice.
I like that. That could be really cool, having the weather system be the state of emotion going on.
Yeah, the weather and the environment. Because I want this character to have like I'm using the fog because I want this character to have like no insight at all. Because you know how you are when you're like 20 years old and you think you know everything
Yeah.
and know zero.
Yeah.
So I want this character to have.
Can't relate. I was a smart 20-year-old.
Yeah. So I want this
Slava's
character to
different. He's
have
special.
like no self-awareness. I want the audience, I want the reader to have all the awareness and the narrator to have zero awareness. And I want to see how that works.
And that's perfect for a horror novel because you as the viewer know that there's a monster behind the door and you're like, where the hell are you going? Don't go in that door, or whatever the setup may be. And what makes good horror is the atmosphere. It's not just a girl scared in the closet by a noise. It's a dark house. Nobody's home. Parents are away. It might be raining.
Yeah.
And, you know, the scrape of the axe against the hardwood floor. You can make up any scenario. That atmosphere is what makes horror good.
Yeah.
Or what makes good horror good.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Sure.
I do not know if it's going to be good yet because I probably have to do 9 drafts again.
Sure.
Yeah.
Figure it out, But I do. It is a genre that I like. I'm not a person who likes like grisly kind of stuff, but I do like the genre, especially when it's well done.
Yeah, like it's like movie nomenclature, but like torture porn. Like it's just people like the Saw series, where it's people getting their heads get cut off, or people getting tortured, or limbs, and it's all for shock value.
Yeah,
I don't like that kind of horror. I like the atmospheric horror, even if it's supernatural, like The Exorcist, the book, and the original movie. That's good horror. Insidious, with the parts I've seen, I haven't seen all the way through. It has some of those tropey jump scares, but the atmosphere is amazing. Like the book, the Amityville Horror, the story itself is kind of bland. People move into a house, there are ghosts, people go insane. But the way that the original book was written, it's so dry, it's so mechanical, and at the same time, you're getting into the head of this guy, the father, who constantly is going deeper and deeper into, I guess you'd call it madness or depression.
Yeah.
And then there's a description of what's going on in the house. It just like jolts you out of this guy's head. So you're almost like, wah, 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 and then boom, like furniture flying across the room. To me, all that is the setup of the atmosphere. So like fog, is perfect. Now, I'll end my rambling with this. Like Silent Hill is a horror video game, and you really never know what's going on. You're in this town and you're a detective or somebody, depending on the version of the game you're playing, but there's a constant fog around the town, and you meet different people, and then you're shot into an action scene where you're fighting a monster. So I think if you have the atmosphere down, you'll hit another one out of the park, Debbie, because that's what, for me, as a horror aficionado, I'll say this with confidence, if you get the atmosphere right, horror will be well executed. Your horror book will be well executed.
Thank you. I'm trying to I guess all the stuff going on right now with the Epstein files and stuff, I don't know if I can write like a real life horror. I'm just gonna take a shot at it, right? Yeah. Because all some of these conspiracy theories, like, are turning out to be a little bit real. So I mean, like, ooh, that's kind of like, wow, that's something I can write about.
Yeah,
it's real life horror.
There are evils in the world, and they try to stay hidden, but eventually they come to light every time.
Yeah.
It might take decades, but it comes to light.
Yeah.
Oh man. So what's your timeline on this new book? I mean, you're chapter and a half in, you said. So what are your desired goal?
I'm actually retiring from my day job in June 11th.
Ooh. Congratulations.
So I'm gonna be able to like work. I'm gonna do like the Stephen King thing. Like I'm gonna walk in the morning. I'm gonna read every day, and I'm gonna write every day. Isn't he done like 1:00 in the afternoon every day? Something like that.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I am gonna follow his, and so we'll see how long it takes. Right now, I am just like inundated with work with my job. I'm even going in today a little bit, so it's gonna be hard for like the next month. But after that, I plug away every day. be very disciplined, even though some days it feels like you don't have it in you. I think
Yeah.
that that's where the art comes. You just have to kind of like just plug away, and even if it doesn't sound good or it's not working, just show up. So much of
Yep.
my life has been about showing up. And so many of the teenagers that I work with have a hard time showing up, or even some of the adults, because I'm a school psychologist. And I've just learned that's like one of the most important things you can do. And even with writing, just showing up every day.
Absolutely. Yeah, because spoiler alert, the 7-year short story, over the last few months, because I have dedicated myself to writing at least a sentence a day, or after dinner while my wife is watching TV, I will pick up the computer and just knock out a couple of ideas, or even write an actual paragraph or 2 or 10. Hey, when you go back to the rewrite, you're like, oh, well, I'm glad I did that instead of, just sipping on my whiskey and, mindlessly droning out the TV.
And which is really easy to do, by the way.
Yes.
Especially when you're stuck. When you're stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta show up in life every time, regardless of if you're trying to, get fit at the gym or write your book or find a way to travel to Japan on, a shoestring budget. You got to show up. If you want to do something, you got to show up.
Yeah. And and I'm also this year I signed up as an author with the Jewish Book Council, so I am going to be going on tour.
Nice.
Cool.
I sent them 110 books, and so they're going to distribute those 110 books. And then, the book doesn't even really have to be Jewish. They're trying to help Jewish authors because right now they're being dropped by agents, and it's really difficult right now what's going on.
Yeah.
So I signed up with them, had to send out 110 books, and then they're going to be distributing all around the country. And the way it works is they pay all your expenses to bring you out.
Nice.
All expenses.
Wow.
Airfare, hotel. You just have to give a speech for free, and then they have to promise to sell your book.
Okay. That is worth 110 copies.
Yeah. Totally
that's great.
And so maybe something you could do, Slava, once you publish, because it's just a chance to get my book out there. And I'm kind of looking forward to traveling.
Absolutely.
And I'm kind of looking, you have to agree to 3 events. But there's as many as 110. I'm sure there's not going to be 110, but you have to kind of agree. And it's kind of going to be fun in my retirement. But it's hard to do the marketing and the writing at the same time, by the way. Very difficult.
Yeah. That's part of the reason we built this podcast is we wanted to do what we could to help usher in independent authors having space so that, you don't have to market all the time. Now, we're not big enough to say, hey, we're going to help you sell 57 copies. But if we can help you sell 1 copy, we're happy about that because there's people who would enjoy your book that don't know who you are. And so that's why we invite people who are independent authors on the show. I've coined the phrase an indie author uprising because we need new voices and new stories and new worlds to have fun in, right? Like we want to enjoy ourselves. Stephen King, he's had his time, Will White's having his time. It's like, now it's time for Debbie's show. Debbie's time is now.
I appreciate that. Oh, can I put it? I want to say something to other authors.
Please.
So Barnes and Noble has an indie author program.
What?
Where if you get a couple of really good review, like a good Kirkus review, because you have to be good. And so I got a good Kirkus review and I got a good Midwestern book review, right? Those are 2 that are like, you send your book in, they do not have to give you a good review. Most of the time they give you a bad review. Right. So that's kind of like social proof. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's kind of like proof that you're good. Your book is good, right? So once you do that, you have to pay for that. Once you do that, you can submit your book to Barnes and Noble to have it in the bookstores.
Oh, cool.
So
okay.
That's what I did. So I redid the cover because I do take direction well. And I was told that my cover wasn't quite commercial enough for, it's a good cover. but
It's a good cover, but not commercial enough. I see what they're talking about.
It wasn't to genre.
Yep.
So the cover has to be to genre. I guess there's an art to this. Like this is another thing indie authors should know, that these publishing companies spend thousands of dollars, and there's a lot of research, and there's an art for the cover to be right for the genre. So I invested in a cover that's spot on for the genre. And so that's going to be coming out in the next week or so. And so, yeah, I'm shooting my shot with Barnes & Noble. So I just want to let other authors know they can do that.
That's great. Let's follow this thread through. What other information should indie authors know, Debbie, now that you're published? You've had your developmental editor, right, on the same path. Are you using the same one as last time, or did you find a new one?
Yeah, I'm using
for
the same
genre?
one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, developmental author was really helpful. What other advice do you have for indie authors that they should know in their journey to get published?
Okay, so the big thing is to avoid scams, because you get really excited about your work, and you think that I hired some people that were like family or friends of family or whatever, who maybe didn't really know what they were doing 100%. Little scammy. Hire the best people you can afford to do your book cover, to do your audiobook. I mean, I had little hiccups with my audiobook. It's going to be fine, but just don't hire the friend of the friend. The best people you can. Be ruthless about it. Absolutely ruthless. It's your book.
No.
It's not time to like just help everybody you like. It's time to hire people who are really good at what they do and vet them.
Yeah.
Because I've made every mistake in the world. And so I don't want other people to make that mistake.
How did you vet them? Let's talk about that for a second.
Well, I had to make the mistake. And then I had to go and seek out people to fix my mistake. So I've had 2 of everything. And, it's just, I think it's, I'm a good-hearted person, and I'm a little gullible coming from the family that I come from. I was told that it's because when you come from a family that you can't trust, and you really, really need these people as a kid, you turn off your gut feeling about people sometimes just so you can survive. You still have the gut feeling, but you kind of turn it off, and you just want to, either you become distrusting of everybody, or you just trust too much. And I think I trust too much that everything's going to come out okay. So that's a big lesson I learned. And I think maybe, I don't know if other authors have the same issue, but don't do it.
Yeah. Let's talk marketing for a second. What marketing have you found that has worked well for you? And what marketing did you try that you go, man, no one should do this?
I'm still marketing. Let's hopefully the JBC is going to work. What hasn't worked is just putting out like Amazon ads without any proof that the book is any good. I think my cover has not worked for me, honestly, because people definitely, sometimes they buy a book and they don't even read it. They just like the cover of it. Just the idea that they're going to read it.
Guilty.
And it's like, even the spine of the book, I'm having the guy work on the spine because he was just going to give me the spine. And I'm like, nope. So I just, at this point, I know so much to help authors. Like, nope. I took a picture of a bookshelf with a bunch of really good spines. And I said, I want the spine to look like this because I want it to look this way on the bookshelf.
Yeah.
So, I'm doing it right now. But again, I don't want other people to go through this. It's very costly mistakes.
It is. How do you pick who prints your book? Was that something you like? Depends on your publisher, or is it someone like you can say, "Hey, I want to get published with this group because they do gold filigree or something like that"?
What I did for you mean for the cover?
Cover, yeah, the cover.
So what happened is, I had to go to Reddit. These Reddit indie threads are fantastic because they tell you every mistake in the world. So I kind of almost made the mistake again. There's something called 99 covers or something. And what you do is you basically hold a contest.
Yep, 99 designs.
99 designs, thank you. So I held a contest, and I actually held a contest for the higher tier authors. So I had to pay a lot. And I found out you can make a mistake with that too. So I want to let people know about that mistake. But what you do is, then I got something like 250 designs to choose from. And a lot of them were not good and derivative. And I'm not sure I 100% recommend that. And then I've also heard that they're exploited because people from Indonesia or whatever country, that need money will slap up a design, and it's kind of exploiting the artist. But I was able to get a fantastic artist. I mean, you saw the book cover. It's really good.
Yeah, looks cool.
But there were a lot. I would say out of that 250, I would say about 225 were not anything that I would, I was getting a little nervous there. But that did help me.
Yeah.
In the future, I'm going to use this person. That's going to be the only person I'm going to use because he was really, really good.
Nice. How did you initially find your developmental editor?
I was in a writing class, and she was the teacher. And so this is kind of like ego stuff, right? Because I think narcissism runs in the family. I thought I could write a book in the summer. I thought, I'm gonna just like write this book. It's gonna be so good. And then by the end of the summer, I'm like, I better take a class. It's been a while since I've taken a writing workshop. And then I met her, and it probably took me 3 months with her before I got a chapter that was actually in the book. Everything else I threw away. So yeah, some of it's just ego. I hate to say. That's what my mistakes are about too, is ego.
Hey, that's great advice for the people who are coming up and trying to get their stuff published.
Yeah.
So that's we appreciate you going before everyone and making the mistakes and telling us like, hey, here's what to watch out for. Right? So we learned vet whoever you're going to hire. Don't hire friends of the family unless they're actually best in the business.
Yeah.
But then they're probably going to charge an arm and a leg, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
Make sure that you have a voice in the process of, hey, here's what I want it to look like on the bookshelf, right? Like having a voice in the process on how you want your book to be presented to people is also vital. So some really great things. And don't try and write a book over the summer.
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, there are people who do it, but I think it's formulaic, right? And a lot of AI.
Probably. Don't write your book with AI. Really write your book, folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Put the blood, sweat, and tears into it.
Yeah.
Well, as we wind down here, Debbie, do you have any? I know you covered a lot of indie author advice, but any final advice for indie authors or people who have families with trauma? Just Debbie's wisdom for the final show here. Pun intended, I guess.
I think that people who have families with trauma. I mean, just about everybody comes from a family that has trauma. I mean, there's some pretty great families that don't, but most people do. And I think the best advice I can give anybody is that most of the problems in the world are caused by unprocessed pain. So being able to kind of look at what happened, even if it's scary, even if it's like, something you don't want to do, it's like taking a wound and taking care of it. Like if you just let it fester, it just gets worse. And so that's kind of like therapy advice, but it also, I think bibliotherapy, like reading, is really good therapy for people. Not just necessarily my book, but a lot of other books, even horror, whatever genre you like. But also writing is very therapeutic too. I mean, I wouldn't be
Can't confirm.
Without libraries and reading, I wouldn't be who I am today. Reading has been amazing. Better than therapy, and developmental editors are better than therapists because they will sit there and they will tell you the truth, and they won't sit there and give you what you want to hear. So I appreciated that.
Yeah.
We must be kindred spirits, Deb, because if it wasn't for libraries or Stephen King, that guy right there, I might have swallowed a 38 slug when I was a kid. And that's not just, for shock value. Yeah. It was getting immersed in books, getting immersed in stories, being able to escape. As silly as this sounds, even reading non-horror, like reading like Tom Clancy or reading Sidney Sheldon or name, of course, escapes me now, more slice of life books, right? Not so much Tom Clancy, but the others. I was able to like even see how other adults are normal, and that what I'm experiencing maybe not so normal.
Yeah.
Like it gave me perspective. Not only was it an escape, not only was it, kind of elixir for my soul sometimes just to get it lost in the world, but it was also like, wait a minute, I know this is fake. Even as a kid, I was smart enough to understand, I'm reading fiction and there's really no such thing as flying dinosaurs or whatever the crap I'm reading. But like being able to see other parents and adults and kids, even in maybe dramatic situations, go like, huh, this is not like the home life I see every day.
Yeah.
And that kind of steeled me to, try to escape what I was at. So absolutely, 100% agree with you about libraries and reading.
Yeah, that's something that I've talked about on the show too, is like the catharsis of going through another character's journey and then taking that, and you probably have the correct therapy words for it, but like taking that and going like, oh, hey, if they can do something that's worse than what I'm going through, I also can stay strong or similar, right? Like, or hey, they went through something similar. It's glad to know that I'm not alone. Things like that. Like, I've talked about it on probably a quarter of our episodes where like we'll be reading something and I'll be like, man, this reminds me of whatever in my life. And like, I'll break the fourth wall, talk to the audience for a second and be like, look, if you're going through this stuff, like it's real, it sucks, but this is kind of why we read. So I'm glad to know that there's some real research behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's great. Wonderful. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Debbie. Thank you for sending us your book and letting us have the pleasure of being some of the first readers for it and sharing your life with us and your wisdom, both
Absolutely.
in the publishing journey and also the traumatic processing of family life as you grew up.
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure.
Appreciate it. And honestly, thank you for having me on the show. And I'll let you go about your day, the rest of your day.
We look forward to when you finish a copy of your next one. Please reach out to us. We'd love to.
Okay, I will.
Absolutely.
Make sure it's really good because we've got some connoisseurs here. So
yes,
that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Take care.
Wonderful.
All right, Debbie.
Okay.
Take care, Debbie.
Okay. Bye-bye.
I have a favor to ask you. If you like what we're doing, the simplest way to support the show is to hit subscribe. In return, we'll keep leveling up and we'll listen to your feedback and read authors that you suggest. And of course, we'll take side quests along the way. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.